Well, now we have the drums and bass forming the groove of the record, two leads, a piano and a small motif. I think we've got plenty to work with, so the next step is to begin constructing some kind of arrangement around them. Now, of course, on the surface this can appear to be a fairly limited collection of instruments, and to some, certainly too low to even begin considering starting an arrangement. However, this is where perhaps the most common mistake is made by practicing artists and producers. For some reason they feel the need to put plenty of instruments in the mix, when in reality it couldn't be further from the truth. I find a lot of musicians and newcomers who are moving into composition and production tend to throw too many ideas at a track. They try to cram them all in with a shoehorn approach. This quickly leads to disaster as all the ideas begin to conflict with one another. The track loses its direction and focus, and, well, of course, mixing becomes an absolute nightmare. If you listen closely to any great trance track, they consist of only a few instruments and motifs or melodies, but each is carefully programmed and engineered to produce the final picture. In fact, commonly, if you listen closely enough, there's only 3 to 5 melodies at most, and many of these are variations of a single melody. It's because the purpose of trance is not to cram 300 ideas into the pot and then try to mix it, but develop on only a few ideas. In fact, this same principle applies to nearly all music. Listen to any classical musical piece, any piece of pop music, and certainly any trance music, and they'll all follow the same pattern of repeating a melody but in slightly different ways. I mean, obviously this is especially the case with dance music production. The use of filters and effects should never be underestimated. And with the invention of track automation, the initial melodies are becoming simpler, but the production is becoming more complex when you start running automation on most tracks consisting of anything from delay, panning, filter core, resonance. As an example, the movement of a filter cutoff over a period of 8 bars can maintain enough interest without a requirement for any other instruments to be added. Just the motion of that filter can be enough to carry the track for 8 bars, 16 bars, and in some cases even 32 bars. Therefore, it's always best to get the drums, bass, and a couple of motifs down and then start looking at an arrangement. By carefully moving the parts around the sequencer to build the beginnings of an arrangement, you tend to build a better picture of the finished product, and you'll discover whether you really need to add another instrument or melody. And in most cases, you'll find that just simple automation of cutoff or delay, you need to remove your instruments rather than add them. Now, for obvious reasons, we're not going to start covering automation here. It's something you should already know very well if you've been using a sequencer for any amount of time, and especially if you read the manual. So moving on to the arrangement, it is seen by quite a few as incredibly complex, but in our opinion that couldn't be further from the truth, because every single one of you watching and listening to this DVD is already a master of arranging. It's just that you don't realise it. Almost every trance track in the world relies on segmenting an arrangement into sequences of 8 bars. Not 7, not 6, not 9, not 10, 8. And while making this arrangement, if we were to introduce a new instrument after or before 8 bars, such as if we brought a hi-hat in at bar 9 or bar 7, it would sound unusual. You just wouldn't be prepared for it. On that, I should point out that many sequencers actually start at bar 1, not bar 0. So although you wouldn't introduce an instrument on bar 9, within an actual sequencer environment, you would, since it's really bar 8 and not bar 9. I hope you follow me on that one. Anyway, since nearly every trance track follows the 8-bar principle, it's become subconsciously ingrained into you. So much so that the instruments reduced any earlier or any later, it just sounds wrong. Of course, you can run in divisions of 8. For example, you can go for 16 bars and then introduce a new element, or run for 4 bars and introduce a new element. But if you introduce a new element at bar 15, 14 or 13, it would just sound totally wrong. I've no doubt some will refute this, but Joe Public likes to know what to expect. They don't like surprises in their music. It's the reason why pop music has maintained its verse and chorus structure, why dance music is segmented into genres, and why rock music uses guitars. If you don't believe me, give it a go yourself. Try introducing a new instrument in your own arrangement at the 5th bar rather than the 6th, or the 7th rather than the 8th. Play it back and ask yourself if it sounds right. Now, there's plenty of successful musicians out there who, after releasing hits, came out with tracks that bombed because they disregarded this simple rule: some kind of predictability. You listen to a certain artist and you have a general idea on what to expect. The same applies with all genres of music. You listen to it and you have a certain idea of what to expect. Now, typically, we spend a good 15 to 25 hours arranging a track, dropping in automation, editing parts, moving parts around. And to be honest, after a lot of discussions, we've decided against leaving in the entire video of us arranging the track, since after 5 minutes, you're going to become incredibly bored just watching us cut stuff up and move it around. And you'll be fast forwarding it to get to the meat and potatoes of what we're doing. So what we're going to do is, in true professional style, we're going to jump forward to where the arrangement's almost complete. And so here we are in the general arrangement now. Now don't panic, we're going to spend the next 30 or so minutes walking you through how we built this arrangement and why we've done what we've done. Now first of all, let's examine the first 8 bars. Now, unsurprisingly, we start with the kick. You pretty much do this with every dance record, simply because it allows the DJ to determine the tempo and also allows him to mix it in with the next record. Now, for us, the kicks on their own didn't quite give the track the energy we thought it needed, so we also added the closed hats, shakers, and shaker chorus. Now, you're probably wondering why we've called it shaker chorus and why it occurs right at the very beginning of the record. Well, we actually called it a shaker chorus right at the very start because when we were programming the drum loop, we felt that these shakers seemed to uplift the track a little, so we'd leave them for the uplift, and by labeling them chorus, we'd have a good idea that that's where we wanted to use them later on in the record. However, after 17 or so hours of arranging this, we've decided against that, and we decided to use them at the very beginning. Now, you'll notice we've also added a crash symbol here. Now, this probably will come as no surprise. We do have a couple of ultra beat banks full of crash samples. So all we simply did was call that up and add it along here. Now you're probably wondering why we didn't add crashes right at the very beginning when we were starting all this. Well, the simple reason is that a crash is used to denote something special, something that's about to happen. And while we're doing the initial programming, nothing really is going to happen. It only occurs when we come to the actual arrangement. So we always leave our crashes out until we come to the arrangement and then we start to add them. Now finally, you'll notice that we've also got 2 leads, a lead 1 and a lead 2. Now all these are, if you recall back to the motif, when we wrote the motif and then we decided we'd experiment and we cut the pluck timbre into 4 channels. 2 channels contained 3 bars and 1 channel contained 1 bar. Well, all we've done here is we've bounced the 2 channels that contained 3 bars down into 1 channel and the 2 channels that contained 1 bar down into another channel. Now that probably sounds more complicated than it is, but that's how we did it. We play these for a total of 8 bars, where we then introduce the bleep motif. Now notice how we drop out the kicks there. That's just to help signify a change. We could have put a crash or something else there. We just thought if we dropped out the kicks, it adds that little bit more interest. And also sometimes it can help DJs with their mixing. If it just suddenly goes quiet for that second with the beat, they can have a quick mix through. Now we'll give you a playback of what we have there. Now you may have noticed something there with these 2 leads, and basically what we've done is we've filtered them down and lowered the volume a little, and as the track progressed up towards this, We slowly increased it using automation. We opened the filter slightly, but not fully, until the kick drops out. And as soon as the kick comes back in, we've opened it fully and also increased the volume. We used automation to accomplish this, and it creates a jump from one segment of the song to another, which seems to uplift the track. You notice that at that point we've also introduced the crash to signify a crescendo, something new coming in. And we've also added the bleep motif. Now, this bleep motif, we've basically cut it up into smaller segments and just scattered it around to try and make the beginning of the mix more interesting. And at this point, you may notice we've also added 2 open hats and tambourines just to give the mix that little bit more energy when it starts to come in again. We'll just give you a quick listen to that. Now again, you may have noticed something here. Again, we've dropped out our kicks there, which basically is just for continuity. We dropped them out there, so when we're going to introduce something else new, let's drop them out there. But also you've noticed that the hi-hats, the open hi-hats drop out. And also the shakers there drop out. Now the reason for this is, we're about to introduce the bass. Now what we need to do is, with the bass running for around 4 bars, we don't add some excitement as though the track started to power in again. But we don't have a lot more drum instruments to add. So basically what we do is we drop these out while we introduce the bass, and then we bring them back in here along with our clap. And immediately that creates a sudden burst of energy, which you'll hear in a moment, and it can be incredibly important for this part of the mix. Notice as well that we've now introduced the motif fully. What we'll do is we'll play that back for you now. Now can you see there that immediately creates this huge uplift in the track and sounds like the track's really starting to roll along. And we've accomplished that, as I mentioned, just by dropping out the hi-hats there and the shakers there. Now what we do next is we count 4 bars and then we introduce the pad timbre. Now this is not the complete pad, this is just our first underlying pad, which is the pad you see there. It's the one we programmed on our CS6X and the XV5080. That's just to create a bit of an underbed along the track and make it carry along until we introduce the piano. So just have a listen to that. Now, again, notice the continuity. We dropped our kicks out there, we dropped our kicks out there, and again we've dropped them out there. Again, just keeping some kind of continuity along so people know what to expect. They're starting to learn how the track goes and how it works. And you can notice that we have dropped them out there because the claps continue for the extra beats afterwards. Now, it's at this point we drop out the clap and the clap reverse. Simply because we're starting to introduce a piano. Now we're introducing the piano now because if you look at this arrangement here, we're suddenly going to change from part A of the track to part B. And we need some kind of lead, something that will lead us from part A to part B without them sounding like individual records. And we do this simply by slowly breaking down and introducing the piano. Now the piano, we're slowly introducing and filtering up, but at the same time we're filtering down the pads so they lie low in the mix. And it's the piano that's basically carrying the mix all the way along while the lead fades out, both leads. Now we've filtered these down and used volume at the same time, and at the same time that we're fading them, we also fade out the motif. So slowly part A of the mix is fading away while part B of the mix is slowly building up. Have a listen how that sounds. Now I'm just going to stop that there. Now, it's perhaps at this point here where we've got an entire breakdown that pretty much there's only that part playing there. This is why in an earlier session we felt we had to go into outboard gear because we needed that perfect sound. Even though it only occurs for that little part there, but that gels the entire mix, and if that was a different timbre, that wasn't quite the right timbre, the entire mix could fall apart on that. But notice, as I've mentioned, that the piano slowly comes up in filter and volume while every other instrument fades down, and then we have our small break where just the CSX is playing in the XV5080, and then we introduce the pad choir and we bring the piano in properly because we've now moved at this point to the second section of our mix, which is the part B of the mix. Now we play our piano. Again, unsurprisingly, we always work in 4s or 8s. We play our piano until the main lead here, and again, if you listen carefully, the main lead is filtered down, and the idea is we slowly introduce, open up the filter some more, and then we bring the piano in again, the bass comes in, the shaker, the hats, and we have a few crashes, and then we break down again before we bring all our instruments in. Every one of our instruments is playing there from part B. Now the continuity between part A and part B is contained in the piano and in the pads. that's our only continuity, because pretty much we've changed everything else. So apart from our drums, our bass, everything else has changed. But listen to how it sounds. There's the filter on the piano. Just taking the top end off so it's not too bright. Slowly increase the volume on the piano. Ready to introduce the main lead. The main lead slowly filters up. Now note what we've done with the kicks there. You'll notice that they pounded one after the other. It's essentially like a snare drum. We've simply done this just to add a bit more power to the record, and it helps with the build-up. And as you can see, we also filtered them up in volume. We just used automation on volume on them, punched it in, and then just allowed the automation to bring it up to full, and then we used it there. Now, importantly, we used that sort of kick method a number of times throughout the track. In this main section, and to keep the continuity, we remove the kicks as we did earlier down in the mix. Just to help keep some continuity in the mix. Now, our lead section plays. Now, when we reach this point, you may have noticed that we introduced the pad choir, which is the choir program on Philharmonic and the EXS sampler. Now, the reason we're introducing this is because we're preparing for the breakdown back into section A, because we're currently in section B, and we need to work towards this breakdown. By introducing this pad, it just makes that a little bit thicker, as though it's building. But as we go along, we start to drop instruments. And at this point, you'll notice if we go to there, we do our double kick missing, as we've done to keep our continuity. We cut a lot of the instruments down, leaving just the bass, an open hat, the pads, the main leads, and the piano. And as the track plays along, notice how it changes. We play along, all of a sudden we drop. Now at that point there, the piano drops out and the lead's on its way out. Notice as well that our CSX pad goes as well, as does our pad choir. Now you notice that we don't have to work to build up section A again, the same as we had to work to build section A down and slowly introduce and build up section B. We don't have to do that with this part, because the public are already aware of part A, they've already heard it, so they know that when we finish with part B, we're going to go back to part A anyway. So we can do that rather abruptly, it doesn't really matter. So just have a listen to that. notice at this point here as well that we've done our breakdown, and all of a sudden we jump straight back in with it. We bring our bleep motif back in, although intermittently, like the very beginning of the record, intermittent. And although we jump back into most of this, we do wait until there, until we bring our claps back in. Now the reason for that is that we've jumped from one section to another. We've slowed down the pace of the music a little, and we don't want to slow it down too much for too long. So we slow our pace down, and then all of a sudden we build our pace back up a little, just to give it a little bit more energy. And as it moves along, we build up again to build a little more energy, before we slowly move down and start to calm the mix down and move into the outro. And the outro is where we start to filter down the leads, and we start to remove instruments all the way along. Basically just to make it sound ready for the next mix to come in. Now an important note here is, I want you to listen how the bass moves up and down, but as we get towards the end of the mix, we don't change pitches in the bass, we keep that the same. We accomplish that simply by cutting the audio and pasting it along, and it's simply because we don't want to make it too difficult for a DJ to harmonically mix in the next record. And if our bass is constantly moving up and down over the bars, it will make it more difficult. So we keep it moving till we reach very close to the end of the record, and then we keep the bass in the same pitch. Now, I should point out that this arrangement is far from finished. We need to add some more effects in there. I think there's a few swoosh sounds and filtering up and down and things riding around the mix and moving about, just to build it up a little. I also think it should do with the typical trance boom. So what we'll do is we'll start adding some of these effects, and for the next session, we'll show you how to program a typical swoosh, and then what we'll do is we'll add these into the mix and we'll make it finish. But before we do that, what I want to do first is I want to play this mix back from beginning to end, and I want you to listen to it. I want you to think where you would introduce the booms or the swoosh or the odd occasional sound to improve the arrangement.